Mr. Ong Ye Kung.
Mr. Chairman, let me first start by addressing Associate Professor Daniel Goh's question on GEMS, Grant for Equity Market Singapore. Let me first explain. GEMS as a scheme is funded by the FSDF, the Financial Sector Development Fund, which was set up in 1999 following the demutualization and listing of the Singapore Stock Exchange. So it is not funded from taxpayers' money. And the scheme was then designed in response to feedback from the industry that a vibrant equity market requires not only new listing but also sustained investor interest post-listing. So it's really a fund started from the industry, took in feedback from the industry, and you design GEMS. And the primary aim is to strengthen public financing channels for growth enterprises, in particular small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs. So GEMS does so, as Associate Professor Goh mentioned, by defraying listed related expenses and promoting better research coverage of the sectors they are in, as well as their business models. There are certain sectors that we can do better in attracting listings, high growth sectors being one example, and GEMS is designed to promote those sectors. There are also gaps in investment coverage for small and mid-cap listed enterprises and new business models. This is why the scheme comprises a listing grant and research-related grants to improve the equity research ecosystem. The quantum of listing grants has thus been also tiered to favor high-growth areas such as the technology sectors. Well-developed sectors such as real estate investment trusts and business trusts do not qualify for the grant. Applicants for the research grant are also required to provide coverage for small and mid-cap listed enterprises. It's a young scheme. I'm sure different agencies will monitor the effectiveness, take in further feedback and inputs, and try to improve the scheme over time in order to serve its objectives. Mr. Dennis Tan asked about corporate governance and that whether it should just be left as internally driven processes, and whether SGX, RegCo, ACRA can do more. He called for an independent task force to review the corporate governance framework, a government agency to provide oversight on corporate governance standards, improve audit quality. Actually, many of these features already exist within our current system. MAS, as the statutory regulator of Singapore's capital markets, and SGX, as the frontline securities market regulator, oversee the corporate governance standards of listed companies, set out in the Code of Corporate Governance. The SGX listing rules, in turn, require companies to disclose how the company's practices conform to the principles in the Code. The Accounting and Corporate Regulatory Authority, ACRA, is responsible for upholding financial reporting and audit quality by inspecting the statutory audits performed by public accountants. As for an independent task force to review the corporate governance framework, as Mr. Dennis Tan has alluded to, MAS has convened an industry-led corporate governance council in 2017. That was an ad hoc council. It had a list of recommendations. MAS accepted all the recommendations that the Council submitted last year in August. Consequently, changes were made to the Code and the SGX listing rules to implement the recommendations. So in line with one of the key recommendations of the Council, MAS established now a permanent Corporate Governance Advisory Committee, the CGAC, earlier this month. The CGAC comprises prominent industry leaders with stature and corporate experience to advocate good corporate governance practices. It will identify current and potential risks to the quality of corporate governance in Singapore and advise the regulators on corporate governance issues. High standards of corporate governance do help sustain good corporate performance for the long term. It ensures good systems and structures to evaluate investment, manage risk, safeguard all shareholders' interests, conduct leadership succession, and other key processes in a company. However, risks are inherent in investment. One of the key aims of regulation is to require that investors have access to up-to-date, material information such as a listed company's financial condition and prospects in order to make informed investment decisions. Investors, on their part, also need to pay close attention to what is disclosed, look beyond potential returns and assess if they can also accept the risks that come with specific investments. The regulators, ACRA, MAS, SGX, RegCo, will continue to calibrate rules and work with stakeholders such as the new CGAC to strengthen the corporate governance standards and practices in Singapore. At the same time, we will continue to educate the investing public on the trade-offs between risk and return through the Money Sense program. Lastly, Ms. Anthea Ong asked about sustainable financing. MAS is committed to advance the agenda for sustainable finance. As a member of the Network for Greening and Financial System, MAS works closely with our international counterparts to develop best practices for financial institutions, or FIs, to manage climate risk and opportunities. Let me outline MAS's efforts in 3 key areas. First, our local banks have implemented policies aligned with the guidelines on responsible financing issued by the Association of Banks in Singapore to evaluate their borrowers' environmental, social and governance risk, ESR risk, and help borrowers improve their sustainability profiles. In this regard, the local banks have also committed to stop new financing of inefficient coal plants. MAS also expects insurers to consider environmental risk in their risk assessment and has introduced a climate scenario in our industry-wide stress tests. Second, the financial industry is promoting green financing, such as green bonds. Over $2 billion of green bonds have been issued to date following the introduction of the MAS Green Bond Grant Scheme. Recently, the scheme was expanded to cover social and sustainability bonds. Indeed, within the asset management sector, the large majority, or 80%, of sizable asset managers in Singapore are signatories to the UN Principles for Responsible Investment and take on broad environmental, social and governance risk. They take on this ESR risk considerations in their investment processes. In MAS's own investment portfolio, we have been actively working with our fund managers to ensure that ESG considerations are incorporated. And finally, to strengthen the region's financial resilience to disaster risks and address protection gaps, the Southeast Asia Disaster Risk Insurance Facility will be set up in Singapore this year as ASEAN's first regional catastrophe risk pool. It will better cover emergency response costs in the aftermath of catastrophes. MAS will continue to work with key stakeholders in the financial industry to promote the sustainability agenda. Thank you.